So 954, confused. So the humans and the Isha were bare and were not confused. Okay, why would they be confused by not being bare? It says, okay, they were bare. They weren't confused. Well, if they were not bare, they would be confused. That seems to imply that they'd be confused if they were not bare. And we're going to find out that the confusion comes from this type of clothing that is a technology, and it's explained in the very next verse, which is Genesis 3:1. So it says, the humans and the Isha were not confused. And then in Genesis 3:1, it says, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field. But this word serpent, 5175, means image. So we're talking about an image here. It says, they were bare, they weren't confused. But the image was more 6175 crafty. So the image was more crafty than any 2416, which means sustenance right here. The image was more crafty than any sustenance of the 7704, which is it's from an unused root, meaning to spread out. So it's a plain or a country right here. It also means country. But I just wanted to point out that an unused root may refer, if it's an unused root referring to something that's spread out, it might be referring to space, or it might have originally been referring to space. But we're just going to use the word country here, but I just want you to keep that in mind, that it's possible that it was saying that this image was more crafty than any sustenance of space. But we're going to put country in here. So that's what it literally means. So now the image, so it's saying the humans and the Isha, remember in Genesis 2:25, the last verse, it says, the humans and the Isha were bare and they were not confused. Then it says, now the image was more crafty than any sustenance of the country which the Yehovah had created. So we know this word Isha here is right here. And he said unto the Isha, did God tell you, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? So this word eat, 398, we know that means to devour, a call. It also means to use, right here, to use. So it's saying, did God tell you you should not use of every tree, 6086, which we also know means shaft, of the garden, which is 1588, and we also know that means enclosure. Okay. Sorry about that. My computer's kind of slow. So it says, the humans and the Isha were bare and they were not confused. But then it says, the image was more crafty than any sustenance of the country which the Yehovah had made. And he said unto the Isha, did Elohim tell you you cannot use of every shaft of the enclosure? And the Isha said unto the image, and remember these filler words right here, that was put in later. They're not actually part of the text. So the Isha said image. Those are really the only words that are in there. Eat, fruit, trees, garden, or Isha said image, use And then this word fruit, 6529, also means reward. So use reward of the shaft of the enclosure. So did God tell you you should not use the shaft of the enclosure? And the Ishah said unto the image, we may use the reward of the shafts of the enclosure, but of the reward of the shaft which is in the midst of the enclosure, Elohim said, you shall not use it, neither shall you 50-60, which means to be stricken by. So neither shall you be stricken by it, lest you die. And so Ishah is saying, Elohim told us not to use the shaft because if we use the shaft, we'll die. And the image says to the Ishah, you won't die. Elohim knows that in the day you use the shaft, then your 5869, right here, which means appearance, in the day that you use the shaft, your appearance shall 6491, which means blossom. So Elohim knows you're not going to die. In the day that you use the shaft, your appearance shall blossom and you will be like gods. And then 3045 means be perceived. And then 2896 means, sorry, my computer's slow. It means pleasant or agreeable or better. It also means beautiful and fairer. So you will be perceived beautiful or fairer. And 7451, which means favored. So Elohim knows that in the day you use the shaft, your appearance will blossom and you will be perceived beautiful and favored. And when the Ishah saw that the shaft was good provision, right here, this word 3978 means provision. So when the Ishah saw that the shaft was a good provision and that it was pleasant to the eyes, well, this word it right here, 1931, can change the meaning of that sentence. Because in 1931 also means he or she. It can mean he, she, or it. Right there, 1931. So when the Ishah saw that the shaft was a good provision and that he or she was pleasant to the eyes, because remember the Ishah goes into the shaft, uses it, it says, oh, well, when you use this shaft, it's going to cause your appearance to blossom. You will be perceived beautiful and favored. And when the Ishah saw that the shaft was a good provision, that he or she was pleasant to the eyes, and that it was a shaft to be desired to make one 7919, which means to prosper, have success. So right here, when the Ishah saw that the shaft was a good provision, that he or she was pleasant to the eyes, and that it was a shaft to be desired to make one have success, he or she took of the fruit thereof. So 6529 also means reward again. So took of the reward and did use. And gave also unto 376, which is human being. So again, the prepositions that are in here, like her and it, these are things that were added later in some cases. So in this case, it was added later. So the Isha took of the reward and used it, and also gave it to the humans that were with them. So Genesis 2:25 is saying, it started out that the Isha and the humans were bare. So remember, the humans and the Isha is part human, but not completely. The Isha and the humans were bare and they were not confused. But then this image came along, and they found out that they could use this image that would change their appearance and make them beautiful. And so the Isha started using this technology and gave the technology also to the humans that were with the Isha. And that improved their prosperity, gave them success. And then it says the eyes, which is 5869, and we know that means appearance. So the appearance of them both blossomed, 6491, we already know that means blossomed, and they 3045, which means learn to know or distinguish. So the appearance of them both blossomed, and they learned to distinguish the 5903, bare. So they learned to distinguish who was bare and who wasn't, basically. So the appearance of them both blossomed, and they learned to distinguish between being bare and being clothed with this technology that changed their appearance. So, and then it says, so their appearance blossomed, and they learned to distinguish between the difference between being bare and being clothed with this, and they sewed fig leaves. But this word 5929 also means branch. So they sewed the fig branch together. This is important. This is code, because it talks about this later. But they sewed the fig branch together and made themselves 2290, which is the word armor. And this stems from 2296, which means to bind on. So they're binding on this armor, and that's another code word, because it talks about those who are bound later in the New Testament. So the appearance of them both blossomed, and they learned to distinguish bare, being what being bare was, and they sewed the fig branch together and made themselves armor, made themselves bound in armor. So this is some type of cloaking technology, it sounds like. They bound on their armor and sewed the fig branch together. Okay, so this is also giving us a reference to the timing of this event, the timing of when they discovered this shaft and started using it to change their appearance. And that's because in Matthew 24, Jesus said, when the fig tree's branch is tender, it is near, even at the doors. And Hosea 9 tells us Israel is the first ripe in the fig tree. So Israel became a nation in 1947. Right here, that's when the United Nations declared that they could create their country. And 1947 is also the year the UFO craze started in the United States with the Roswell incident. So 1947 is when the fig tree branch was young. And that's when they learned how to use the shaft that changed their appearance. Right here.